Cheney University of Pennsylvania, the oldest black university established in 1837. This college has survived decades of barriers and still stands today as an important establishment for the black community. Unfortunately, all HBCUs aren't able to say the same. Morris Brown College, located in Atlanta, Georgia, was shut down after it had filed for bankruptcy in 2002. It lost its accreditation due to an unstable financial position, which is not the only school to do so. Guadalupe College, established in 1884, decimated in 1936. Leland University, established in 1870, decimated in 1960. Cottrell College, established in 1886, decimated in 1975. Mary Holmes College, established in 1892, decimated in 2004. And Lewis College of Business, established in 1928, decimated in 2013. All of these are black colleges and universities that were shut down due to financial deposition.
The lack of funding regarding HBCUs, this goes back in time, and what I look at with regards to people that we often try to make something like that. What is happening right now is just started. That this is the first time. This is the first time we've ever experienced this. Again, incorrect. Because we go back to 1949 at Georgia State College, President James Colson, called out disparities with regards to the University System of Georgia or the state of Georgia and how they were funding HBCUs. So we're looking at 1949. But prior to that, Benjamin Hubert also had questions with regards to funding for us to even have buildings on this campus. And the state of Georgia gave some of the funding, but then thought that we were not going to achieve being able to build these structures, have these structures here on the campus. So we're looking at early 1900s. So from 1890 on, we've always dealt with that issue. And HBCUs across the country, especially the public ones, have dealt with the disparities.
With so many black men and women graduating from HBCUs and empowering the culture, you think that we get more help with funding, right? Wrong. These lack of funds put more pressure on financial aid, parents, and students to stay enrolled.
Problem is external in regards to low funding for HBCUs, and I feel that way because I feel as if PWIs get more funding, and I don't understand why, because HBCUs deserve the same amount of funding. Even though we may have smaller schools, or even though we may be a historically black college, I feel as if we still deserve the same amount of funding. We do the same things that they do there. We have great education, we are accredited, so we should get the same resources that they get, and it should be equal.
But we all know equality has never been America's strong suit. In fact, an HBCU was recently merged. Albany State University now shares their campus and student life with Darton State College, a local predominantly white institution that doesn't stand on the same historical ethics, culture, and empowerment of the community, but must be combined with an institution that does, with faculty that does, and a student body that also stands on the same principles.
When you take away that access to that learning style, that learning environment, to the black history, to the black empowerment, to what you see is what you'll be atmosphere. When you take that away, I think many people will tend to lose hope because they may not think it's possible.
Now the question is, does the merging of schools become acceptable, seeing that it may be a school's last chance to remain open? Or is there another way? Is there another option that doesn't require a damage to our HBCU culture? Don't get me wrong, there is nothing foul about sharing a campus with white students. But does the long-term effect of merging us together defeat the purpose of what our ancestors fought so hard to establish? Is it slowly stripping us of what motivates a black student in a poverty-stricken community from attending a school where they may not feel welcome or gain the same black experience?
Internally, I think as African Americans, particularly those who graduate from HBCUs and those who have not, we do have to ask the question, does it make sense to consolidate smaller HBCUs to have a better return for our students, for our alumni, from a philanthropic standpoint? Higher education has become far more complex than it was back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, et cetera. So there is an argument to be made or a discussion to be had internally to address changes in higher education, changes in today's demographic, and what we can do to have a better return or an outcome for our students and for our community. Externally, If we don't do it internally, an external force will do it to us. And the challenge is, if we let people outside of HBCU community do it, it would be done in such a way that they don't have the pulse and the culture of HBCUs. So, in my estimation, it's better that we think this through, be honest with ourselves, and develop solutions. Otherwise, state governments, governors, etc., would do it for us, and that probably going to be to our disadvantage.
So my question is to specifically the university system of Georgia. Is there a game plan to support these black schools and institutions financially, or are you a part of the problem? If we need to fight ourselves, are the students ready to stand against the slow disintegration of HBCUs? Do we care about our culture enough to put a stop to it? Are alumni willing to support us in this journey? The blame may possibly be distributed amongst both, but we're including the higher masses. I believe the scale becomes a bit lopsided.
My twin sister and I were the first to graduate from college in our family, so we had no roadmap. And some of these students come with no roadmap, and all they're looking for is a helping hand. So HBCUs, we have to keep them hands down. They can't go away. The future of HBCUs must remain in order for us to keep that heritage and that family environment that our low-income students are searching for just to continue their education.
How do we get more value, and how do we thrive as institutions versus just surviving? We have a number of schools that are barely surviving. And that's not healthy in terms of what it means for students, what it means for those institutions, what it means for the employees. We have Morehouse College, one of the prestigious institutions I'm a graduate of, that are having to furlough staff. You know, that's just barely making it. And so we have to begin to think strategically and seriously about this issue. Because in the final analysis, if we address the problem well and adequately, then the return on that investment could have an astronomical effect in terms of what it means to black communities.
So we continue to have fun. We continue to gather in fellowship. We continue to enjoy our musicians, our bands, our choirs. We continue to rave at our sports programs. We continue to push black athletes that may not have had a shot at a big Division I school to the professional level. But how long will it last if we don't address the situation at hand?
And you lose tiers. Everybody doesn't want to be in the big tier, but everybody wants to feel the family atmosphere. And that's what HBCUs have always brought, is a family atmosphere for African Americans and really for anybody. So if you take away or keep merging all of these HBCUs and not giving the individuality, especially for regions and especially for historical purposes, then what would you have for these big schools to have? They won't have really no reason. You just become like a conglomerate. You lose the ability to be able to connect in a real way because everything's then become like mass produced. This school obviously represents all of the masses, and it doesn't. We have our own culture in Savannah, there's our own culture in Fort Valley, there's our own culture in Albany. And if you take all of that away and try to merge it into one, it will never actually be a culture. It'll all go away.